as you all find your seats, our next speaker is Mr. Mike Floyd from Defend Our Pets.
First, I'd like to thank the FDA and CBM for the opportunity on the behalf of thousands and thousands of pet families across the United States, Canada, South Africa, and the rest of the world for the opportunity that's been a long time coming. On March 16th of last year, Menu Foods announced the precautionary recall of pet foods that were causing illnesses in pets. That recall over time became the largest pet food recall in world history. And I say world because it wasn't just the United States. This news was not exactly startling information to many of us whose pets had been dying and becoming ill for months. We knew something was going on, but we had a lot of questions. As of May of last year, to give you an idea of the scope, the FDA had a registry for listing pets who were affected by this recall. At that time, over 8,000 pets and pet families were recorded in that registry, with over 4,000 deaths. For those of you who own pets, you know that that's more than just the loss of a little animal. So it's important to remember that I'm here today speaking not just for myself. I'm here for Miriam in St. Petersburg and her little Molly. I'm here for Diane in Prescott, Arizona, and her 2 little kittens. Jennifer in Bastrop, Texas, and her little cat, Timber. Claire and Sophie in Georgetown, South Carolina. Tammy in Ukiah, California, and Melissa in Suquamish, Washington. Sandy in Juneau, Alaska. All across this nation, pet families were affected. The goal of Defend Our Pets, which we started in April of 2007, is to do everything possibly legally and on a regulatory basis to try and prevent this kind of disaster from ever happening again. Simple thing to say, very difficult thing to get accomplished. We now have about 2,200 active members, and including support from actors and others for animals, and many other groups focusing on the right of our companion animals. In January of 2008, we were proud to be named an advisory member to the Pet Food Committee of AAFCO. This was the first consumer representation on any AAFCO committee in a long time. We would like to express our thanks to Ricky and to others for the warmth and understanding of our welcome to that group. Without exception, they've been very helpful and very cooperative. When the recall was first announced, the natural reaction was to ask what had happened. All we knew that our pets were suffering and dying very rapidly. Over a period of time, we discovered that some Chinese companies and individuals had deliberately, please notice that word, deliberately introduced a chemical called melamine into some wheat flour in order to sell it in the United States as wheat gluten, with a greatly inflated and overstated protein content. It turns out that the test used to determine the protein content of wheat gluten examines nitrogen emissions under the certain test protocols. By adding a relatively small amount of melamine to their wheat flour, the Chinese companies were able to get a greatly inflated test score and a higher price for their product. It also happens, not that they cared, but that melamine in the presence of cyanuric acid crystallizes in animals' kidneys, causing renal blockage, kidney failure, and death. But they did get a higher price. The head of one of these Chinese companies has already been executed. In addition, 2 Chinese companies, along with 2 key executives of Kim Nutra in Las Vegas, and we'll get back to that, which is the largest importer of Chinese foodstuffs, has been charged under a federal indictment in a Kansas City federal court. After we discovered what had happened, we began to look at how could this have happened? Who was minding the store and protecting us and our companion animals who can't protect themselves? We discovered that virtually the entire infrastructure of pet food quality control in the United States is mostly smoke and mirrors, bounded by good intent and frustrated and limited by lack of funding. You will hear from the Pet Food Institute and the APPMA and others from the industry that the pet food industry is among the most regulated groups in the United States and approaches the same regulations imposed on human food. This statement is utter and complete nonsense. Regulation and enforcement of pet food quality due to neglect and abuse has been almost 100% voluntary and self-regulated. The industry, through its lobbying efforts, has virtually written the existing regulations themselves. Where was the pet food consumer represented? Nowhere. And lest we forget, the protection of the American consumer is the greatest reason for the regulations in the first place. We seem to lose track of that. They, after all, through their purchases and taxes, pay a lot of the salaries here in this building. This leads us to what I refer to as the chain of greed in terms of how could this happen.